Hello, scamps and scanlines. My name is TBSkyne, and the title of this video is probably going to be a little clickbaity. It'll be something like, what should be the next Arcane? But the answer to that question is Arcane. Like, Arcane Season 2 is the next Arcane. Which begs the question, what's the point of this video then? Well, fair question. Arcane is based around the twin regions Piltover and Zaun and their champions, with a little flavoring of the larger League universe, like Mel Medarda's Noxian family and the Void corruption in Victor's Hextech core. Arcane Season 2, if I were to take a guess, will expand the show into the wider world a little bit, but the world of Runeterra is genuinely quite vast, and there's a number of regions, champions, storylines, and alternate universes that, in my opinion, could easily carry an Arcane-scale show all of their own. So, in this video, because YouTube likes lists, I've been told several years ago it might not be true anymore and this is a bad idea, but who knows? We're gonna count down the top 5 best candidates for an Arcane-scale adaptation. Some of them will work best as animated shows, some of them might work in live action, and absolutely all of them would be amazing with the Muppets. So, without any further ado, let's get right into this sponsorship segment because I kind of need to pay the bills. This video was sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for people who want to explore their own creativity. If there's something you want to learn how to do, odds are pretty good that Skillshare can help. And if you sign up with the link in my description, you'll get a full month of access for free. Skillshare offers video series on self-organizing and prioritizing, including taking care of your mental health while trying to get work done. With a subscription, the fee is ad-free, with new premium classes launching every week, which are fully subtitled in Spanish, Portuguese, French, and German. And since we're talking about film and TV adaptations today, hey, if you want to get into some creative writing of your own, why not check out the series Learn Screenwriting by Writing One Scene in a Screenplay Format by filmmaker and director Olaf de Fleur. It takes you through every step of the process and introduces you to the craft of screenwriting by, as the title suggests, teaching you to write one scene to start with. And it goes through everything from physical formatting to creative writing exercises establishing character, backstory, physical expression, and editing and re-editing your drafts, arguably one of the most important skills for any writer. Skillshare has this and dozens of other series besides on every creative endeavor under the sun, so once again, use the link in my description for 1 month of free access and start exploring your own creativity. Project is easily one of the game's biggest skin lines, featuring a total of 29 different champions incorporated into it. Despite this, its lore is somewhat thinly defined. There's never been any deep dive storytelling on the Project universe, which is kind of a pity. As a TLDR though, it's about half past the future and everything's gone all dystopic. A big giant evil megacorporation, or maybe a bunch of megacorporations, not really clear, but evil megacorporations run the world, and one of their evil schemes is using cyberpunk super technology to turn people into cyborg hybrid super soldiers. This is the titular Project, whose members are used by the megacorporations as private assassins, enforcers, and warfighters. About half of the characters of the skin line are members of the human rebellion called Genetic. They are radical resistance fighters, often former members of Project who fight against the megacorporations for humanity's future. Up against them are the Project loyalists like Zed and Katarina Pawns of the corporations, and their robotic monstrosities like Renekton and Warwick, some of the best skins in the line, fighting secret company wars and enforcing corpo law. Outside the megacities, in the wastelands, the broken and discarded fight for their own future, and out here we have characters like Silas, a charming rabble-rouser using stolen technology to fight against Project, and Pike, a junked Project prototype that rebuilt itself with scrap housing the vengeful minds of 1,000 other prototypes, as well as idealists like Irelia and Akali trying to defend the wasteland community against cops, Project agents, and ecological collapse. In the shadows of all of this, rampant AI technology is beginning to become sentient and hostile, embodied by the Apple Store dystopian program skins, as well as Project Mordekaiser, an insane AI that has concluded that humanity can only survive if its free will is taken away so it can be governed correctly. Like many skin lines, in the absence of deeper exploration, Project is mostly a collection of tropes held together with more tropes, drawing heavily on cyberpunk cliches and concepts, with a big focus on flashy gun and laser sword duels under neon light in the rain. It's an obvious target for adaptation, with the human rebellion against Project as a great starting point for telling stories about this dark dystopian cyberpunk survival world. Since almost every character is a cyborg, there's also lots of ground to explore themes of transhumanism. What does it even mean to fight for humanity when most of your body isn't human anymore? Warwick and Renekton especially, who've been turned into these animalistic futuristic robot beasts lend themselves really well to explorations of these themes. Now, the skin line is admittedly kind of style over substance on a lot of points. Even if cyberpunk as a genre has a lot of interesting endemic themes to work with, Project itself hasn't really established a strong thematic core in all the years that it's been a skin line. This does leave a lot of room for an adaptation to fill in and fill out and deepen, but it's gonna have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Although, honestly, so long as it's paired with a sufficiently stylish animation and art direction, it might be worth it just for the landscapes and the fight scenes. Whatever else Project is, it is visually very striking. Returning to the canon League of Legends universe, hey, you know what's pretty cool? Pirates. Pirates are pretty cool. A couple of decades ago, in universe, there was an ambitious and ruthless pirate named Gangplank, which is a silly name, but then so is Blackbeard, kinda, so just roll with it. Gangplank wanted himself a fancy pair of new guns, so he went to the finest gunsmith in Bilgewater, Abigail Fortune, who crafted a perfect pair of handguns for him. But when stories of Gangplank's violence and brutality made their way back to her, she refused to hand them over. She refused to be part of his reign of violence. So Gangplank shot her husband, and shot her daughter, and set their workshop on fire, and, just to be spiteful, smashed the guns to pieces on the cobblestones as a sign of contempt. Abigail Fortune's daughter, Sarah, survived the blaze and the bullet wounds somehow, and crawled out of the ruins, filled to the brim with hate. She rebuilt her mother's pistols, and while Gangplank rose to power as Reaver King of Bilgewater, she practiced her aim and studied. She began to make a name for herself as a bounty hunter, the infamous Miss Fortune, convincingly playing the part of a sultry pirate maiden, taking advantage of the tendency of, especially men, to underestimate her. And while she collected bounties on Gangplank's allies, she surrounded herself with a dedicated crew of loyalists, all of them with a grudge against the Reaver King. In 2015, when this storyline was first put together, Burning Tides was League of Legends' most ambitious lore event, featuring a massive piece of narrative writing, several big story moments, and even the death of a champion. Because Miss Fortune succeeds. In a daring plan, she blows Gangplank's ship sky high with a cache of explosives and seemingly kills the man for good. He was even briefly disabled in League of Legends itself during the event, having died, as it were, although it was really probably just maintenance and bug fixes in preparation for his upcoming rework. Now, the trouble for Miss Fortune is that with Gangplank dead, Bilgewater needs a leader, and 1,000 murderous pirate captains are ready to fight for that position. To avoid a civil war that would destroy the city, Miss Fortune steps into the politics, eventually becoming Reaver Queen of Bilgewater herself. But she finds in this position that in order to keep the other captains in line, in order to keep the peace, she has to use methods that are more and more brutal, more and more like the regime of Gangplank who came before her. And the more she uses them, the easier it becomes and the more natural it feels to do it. Worse, despite the years of planning and despite the triumph, taking revenge on Gangplank has done nothing to stop Sarah's nightmares of the death of her mother, and the unresolved trauma and a thirst for vengeance that refuses to be quenched is pushing her ever closer to a terrible breaking point. Meanwhile, a half-dead and barely coherent Gangplank is pulled from the water by the indigenous Buru people of the islands around Bilgewater. Their priest, Ilaoi, who is a friend of Miss Fortune, was once Gangplank's lover, but rejected him when he became a tyrant. She tests him with the mystical powers of her god, Nagakeboros, who finds the broken and miserable wretch of a man somehow worthy. Compelled by her religion and against her better instincts, Ilaoi's people heal the pirate lord, graft him with a prosthetic arm, and release him back into the world where he begins to plot his revenge against the Reaver Queen who overthrew him. You see, like, it's a reversal, like, where Miss Fortune was planning the revenge on Gangplank, now Gangplank is planning the revenge on Miss Fortune. And Miss Fortune and Gangplank's conflict is by far one of the most fleshed out and interesting in League of Legends. Miss Fortune especially has a strong, compelling central narrative with a clear arc and a powerful villain to go up against. Bilgewater also has a fantastic diversity of characters. There's the duo of Twisted Fate and Graves, life partners in crime who somehow manage to be bitter ex-boyfriends, husbands, and worst enemies all at the same time. Horrifying ocean wraiths like Pike, a towering deep-water titan like Nautilus, and demons of temptation and addiction like Tahm Kench, lurking in the gambling dens, offering wild pleasures to the gullible. There are also talking octopus boxers, lizard men, shark dudes in top hats, adorable little turtle creatures firing bubble cannons by the beachside, and a cursed ghost island that sends forth the screaming spirits of the dead every year like a tide to crush the living. What I'm saying is, there's a lot of stuff to work with in Bilgewater, and Misfortune and Gangplank's conflict as a central pillar to build all of that around is a really compelling pitch to me. Because what I like is that Misfortune's story isn't just a simple revenge narrative, but also about how you move on from revenge. Misfortune wins, and then she finds that after winning comes living with the victory. She finds that the act of violence that she was taking revenge for wasn't just the product of one man's evil, but a structural condition of the culture that she has grown up in, and she finds that she isn't immune to that pressure either. And that's cool, a story that isn't just about the personal conflict, but about the environment that produced it. Bilgewater is the kind of place where a man like Gangplank thrives, and if you thrive in Bilgewater, then, well, you probably either have to be or become at least a little bit like him. There's a human drama there, a story which is about something, and it deserves a good adaptation, I think. For number 3, let's stay in the main canon Runeterra universe, but turn the clock back, say, a couple of thousand years. In the desert empire of Shurima, glorious emperors rule over a vast and continent-spanning realm. They are empowered by the magic of the sun disk, which not only brings an endless supply of water to the barren desert, but whose magic can empower and ascend the worthy into unstoppable god warriors. But it is an empire run, as empires so often are, on subjugation and slavery, with a long and calcified tradition of nobility and ritual upholding the emperor as a god on earth whose will is absolute. Into this empire, 2 young men are born. Azir, the youngest prince and last in line, is destined to die, an obscure noble running the garrison of a meaningless backwater somewhere in the ass end of the empire. And Serath is a slave boy who saw his own father whipped to death and only escaped a similar fate when his mother gave him up to be apprenticed to an architect. They meet in a library and somehow become friends, and when Zerath saves Azir's life, he promises not only to free Zerath and make him his sworn brother, but to free all the slaves of Shurima and institute a reign of justice and equality. To help Azir achieve this, Serath becomes his right-hand man, his personal slave, and his spy master, doing all the dirty deeds that need doing to make a man an emperor. He foils plots, he destroys usurpers, he even kills the other children of the sitting emperor so no one can threaten Azir's claim to the throne. Azir, for his part, enjoys his rise through the imperial ranks, becoming prouder and more arrogant day by day, and when his position as emperor is secure, he does begin to plan for the abolition of slavery in Shurima, but on his time plan, slowly and very carefully so as not to threaten his hold on power with controversy. When Zerath confronts him, demanding that the emperor keeps his word, Azir, in anger, tells him to know his place as a slave. From that heartbreaking moment forward, Zerath plots not to ascend his former friend to power, but himself, reasoning that the only hope for freedom in Shurima is to take it by force. Azir's arrogance and pride and Zerath's justifiable desperation to be free ultimately become the unstoppable force and the immovable object whose collision ends the empire. Elsewhere in Shurima, a couple of centuries earlier, another pair of brothers struggle. Nasus is a brilliant scholar and tactician, and his brother, Renekton, is a peerless warrior, and they manage to make their way from street kids with nothing to their name to being 2 of the most celebrated heroes in the Shuriman Empire. Nasus, especially, spends a lot of time guiding and protecting Renekton, whose violent temper and impulsivity often gets the better of him. They live grand and famous lives, but then Nasus gets sick with an incurable wasting disease that takes him apart piece by piece. Renekton stays by his side, falling apart with grief and desperation that he cannot save his beloved brother. In desperation to save his greatest tactician, the Shuriman Emperor orders Nasus to undergo ascension. In the magical light of the sun disk, he will either be empowered and transformed into an immortal god warrior, or, like most people, he will be incinerated on the spot and destroyed. Nasus, obediently, tries to ascend to the pyramid for the ritual, but when his legs fail him, Renekton jumps from the crowd, ignoring the outraged screams of the priests and the protests of his own brother, and physically carries Nasus into the raging light, sacrificing himself to save his beloved sibling. The stories of ancient Shurima are stories of brotherhood and betrayal. Azir and Zerath betray each other twice in a struggle over power and freedom, while the brothers Nasus and Renekton sacrifice themselves twice to save one another. If it sounds a little bit Prince of Egypt, that's because it is, but frankly, that's not a bad thing. The two pairs of brothers form a strong parallel set of narratives, all about what it means to love a sibling and what it means to sacrifice for them, and these parallels will eventually collide in the lore's present day to form the basis for some possibly very compelling character arcs if Riot, ever get around to exploring them. On top of that, there's also a good political drama here about the corrupting nature of power and what it can do to twist a person into everything they swore never to become. It's a set of stories whose endings are pre-written and deeply tragic, which means you can make the action leading up to that tragedy as heartbreakingly loving and emotional as you want. Shurima is just also a really interesting region to explore. Once upon a time, it was basically just like fantasy magic Egypt with frankly very little creativity or diversity. Over the years, though, it's been expanded and made more interesting by drawing on wider North African, Persian, and Arabic inspirations, which is an aesthetic and cultural wellspring part of the world that's frankly deeply underexplored in popular media. I think an adaptation of the ancient Shurima storylines is both visually, aesthetically, and narratively a pretty obvious slam dunk. Okay, this one is, at this point, rather painfully obvious, I feel like. Star Guardians needs an anime. It has needed an anime ever since the second wave of skins came out, but it needs one especially badly right now. For those not in the know, the newest line of Star Guardian skins are considered essentially Season 4 of Star Guardians. Like, these skins are already organized as though they are part of a long-running seasonal anime, with Season 1 introducing Lux and her team and chronicling their adventures learning to work together. Season 2 sees the introduction of veteran Ari and her team of somewhat more mature Guardians, along with a deepening exploration of the dark secrets hiding in the deep lore of the Star Guardian universe. Lux and her crew deal with feelings of inadequacy and doubt as they realize how little they know about their job and nature as Star Guardians. Season 3 brings us the Lost Guardian Nico, the fallen Chaos Guardian Zoe, and the corrupted Guardians Zaya and ARCANE, and their whole internal drama. It's all about exploring the concept of falling as a Star Guardian further, exploring what it means for Star Guardians to burn out and the consequences of those kinds of degradations. Season 3 ends with Rakan sacrificing himself to save Zaya, which leads us on to the current Season 4, where Lux and her crew are dead? Or turned into statues? Temporarily, I guess. And there's a new generation of Star Guardians introduced to pick up the pieces, with the storyline split between Akali and Kai'Sa, whose friendship is slowly being splintered by the interference of Morgana and Fiddlesticks, as Kai'Sa tries to be leader for the new squad, while in the other half of the story we have Zaya putting together a team of her own to try and save Rakan and heal her own broken heart. The big problem that Star Guardian has is that while the concepts of each of these seasons is definitely interesting and fun in theory and could make for compelling seasonal anime, Riot has demonstrated no actual interest in actually telling those actual stories. As far as the corporation is concerned, Star Guardians are cosmetics that make money, and the writers are basically not allowed to publish anything about them except when it's to sell more skins. A seasonal anime would be able to fill in the gaps and actually develop the relationships between these characters, which are absolutely key to their stories. Star Guardians are at their core thematically about what a lot of magical girl shows are about: coming of age, discovering yourself, balancing work and study with friendship and connection, and navigating the difficult tightropes of being a teenager trying to grow up. Those stories need breathing room. They can't be told just in once-yearly lore dumps and promotional music videos, no matter how good they may be. Star Guardians are an incredibly popular skin line using an incredibly popular genre of fiction based in an incredibly popular medium, and would absolutely be the best and most obvious candidate for an adaptation, if not for our number one. Before we get to that, though, let's have some honorable mentions. I am very much on the record being a PsyOps hater. I hate the aesthetic, and I don't think the execution on most of these skins is very good either, but I can't deny that there is a really strong core narrative here to work with. PsyOps centers around Sona as this hyperpotent weapon of psychic destruction, who breaks free from her confinement and fights for her own freedom amid a cascading confluence of secret Illuminati organizations, military intelligence agencies, and rogue agents all rushing to secure her power for themselves or destroy her trying. I'm not much for modern military nonsense, but I absolutely cannot deny that this concept is ripe for adaptation into some kind of a high-octane action thriller. Where Star Guardian marinates in the tropes of magical girl anime, Battle Academia is belly-flopping straight into a pool of battle shonen tropes. Based in a world where civilizations have sprung up around mountain-sized ancient god weapons that grant mysterious powers to random human beings, it's set in a series of superhero schools, complete with after-school clubs for sorcery, combat training, and assassination. It's one part My Hero Academia, one part Xenoblade Chronicles, and 100% good cheese. Battle Academia is a solid candidate for an anime adaptation, except it overall just isn't nearly as well realized as Star Guardian, and rather lacks a compelling central plot hook to be built around. Omega Squad started as a jokey-joke legendary skin for the notoriously adorable and annoying champion Teemo, recasting him as a traumatized, nearly psychotic and unstable special forces sniper stuck in a hellish jungle war with all his friends and squad mates dying all around him. And I could absolutely see an Adult Swim-style dark animated comedy being built around war movie tropes happening to the cute, adorable chibi critters of Teemo and his Omega Squad, chronicling their increasingly brutal and horrible deaths and Teemo's descent into broken horror while lampooning and satirizing the pointless cruelty of war. Now, the concept probably doesn't have more than like a single season in it, and Riot probably wouldn't be willing to go quite this dark with their most adorable mascots, but, you know, I'd watch it. Yeah, I didn't say it was just gonna be League of Legends, did I? Valorant is an unholy mixture of Counter-Strike and Overwatch, which brought with it from Blizzard's fallen mega hit a focus on strong character design. The lore of the game feels maybe a little bit cobbled together as more of an afterthought than a central pillar. This is a competitive tactical shooter, after all, not a story game, but over time and through regularly released cinematics, a really solid central narrative has emerged from the game. In Valorant, a group of extraordinary agents defend the world's precious magic mineral resources from theft by their own doppelgangers, alternate versions of themselves from another dimension that has somewhat more advanced technology. The central mystery of the story is, what the hell is up with all of that? And it uses the strong character designs and hefty personalities of its agents to great effect, creating a fantastic sense of camaraderie between the characters as they face their own Jungian shadow doubles and explore the alternate dimension. It's a really solid candidate for adaptation, although I kinda get the sense that Riot would much rather hold on to the lore drops for cinematics and music videos, rather than send them off to an animation studio to be developed into something more concrete that they can't change their minds about on a dime. You know those slice-of-life anime that are just like some characters working in a cafe or whatever, doing part-time jobs or going to work? Like, there's no real dramatic stakes, it's just people hanging out and bouncing their personalities off each other, and watching it is just like a really great way to chill out. Yeah, what if one of those, but with like Pizza Delivery Sivir or the Cafe Cuties skins? There are actually a huge number of the so-called day job skins, including Trundle as a baseball player, LeBlanc as a stage magician, Draven as a late-night talk show host, Janna as a meteorologist, and Corporate Mundo as Corporate Mundo. And I really wouldn't mind a show about Sivir working part-time as a pizza delivery driver and part-time at a maid cafe and juggling those two very different lives while, I don't know, slowly developing an office crush on Vladimir, who's like a charming anime prince type when on the job and a shy, stuttering nerd when he isn't. But then also she has a crush on Birdio, even though she has no idea what he looks like underneath the big mascot suit because they're like hot-blooded competitor rivals. I mean, come on, there's a show in there somewhere, surely. I just like to hang out with these characters and watch them do stuff. And slice-of-life shows, in my opinion, often do better when they're populated with a suitably eccentric cast. And I think it would add something to have, like, Sinful Succulence Morgana show up as a cosplaying baker as a secondary character, always trying to compete with Baker Pantheon, or have Sivir work for a restaurant run by Master Chef Tom Kench. That's good setup for some zany comedy. Not everything needs to be epic all the time, after all. Anyway, the undisputed #1 absolute best candidate for an Arcane scale adaptation is... The thing is, there really isn't a justification I could write for why Odyssey needs and deserves the adaptation treatment that would ever be better than just simply showing you the trailer for the thing. So...
Happy birthday, big guy! Just a sec. There. Hey, dummy. Do you ever dream of a life among the stars? Well, now you can live that dream aboard our magnificent ship, the Morning Star! Let's meet the crew. First up is Malphite, big boy with a heart of gold. We're still working on his temper. Then there's Yasuo, our captain. Nothing faces this guy. Watch. Heads up! And finally, me. Jinx, your trusty pilot. I also like spotted stuff! But wait, there's more. We do all kinds of junk, like recreational activities, hands-on medical training, and team-building exercises. Oh, here's the best part. This beautiful and psychotic assassin wants to annihilate our entire crew. Here's a little message you left us.
You took what is mine. I will find her, and I...
So cool. So, consider this your invite to join the greatest crew in the galaxy. The only question now is what are you waiting for? No, come on! No. So, kid, what do you say?
Look, I just want this show, man. I want this show very, very badly. I want big, cheesy space adventures with this bunch of misfit dumb idiots trying to get a sober-minded space Templar to the magic cosmic gate in order to something save the universe or whatever. I want them to mount impossibly chaotic escapes from Kane and Rast. I want them to accidentally crash their ship into the Space Emperor's dinner and somehow get away with it. I want to see their adventures. And there is actually a much deeper universe in Odyssey than this particular trailer lets on. It's set in a sci-fi world largely conquered by the galaxy-spanning Demacian Empire. That's Demacia with an X. It's a world run entirely on aura, which is a golden metallic liquid with all the usual crazy sci-fi mineral powers. It enables faster-than-light travel, laser swords, giant robots, and freaky psychic/magic powers, and has a monastic religious order dedicated to it who hold dark mystical secrets that could end the universe. And it's harvested from megafauna, which are essentially just enormous sentient space whales who produce the aura inside their bodies, which, like, that's just a cool concept. Space whalers! Space whales are cool! And as for the characters, Yasuo is a former upper-class boy who worked as a high-class bodyguard for imperial celebrities and officials until one day he's framed for his brother's murder. Desperate to escape, he picks up Malphite and Jinx in the nearest bar and steals a ship, the Morning Star, to run away in. Along for the ride comes Sona, a uniquely gifted Templar who can communicate with the aura psychically and who's hunted by Kane, who needs her to unlock what he thinks is going to be godlike powers for himself, even though it's actually going to be the destruction of the entire universe as enabled by Darkstar Rast, a crossover character existing within his scythe. Jinx and Malphite, for their part, are former mining engineers who lost their job, and then their next job, and then their next job because Jinx keeps blowing absolutely everything up all the time. Malphite, for his part, is, yes, the big dumb bruiser type, but also he dreams of going into medicine, and somehow he and Jinx become best friends in spite of absolutely everything. Sona, for her part, was sent to a distant planet to investigate apocalyptic visions received by her order, and she found there an ancient alien device that looked a lot like a scythe and which housed something dark and terrible. That's Rast. Unfortunately, Kane comes along, captures Sona and her crew, and picks up the scythe, which begins to talk to him and tempt him with visions of unparalleled galactic power that eventually drives him entirely insane. Sona escapes, makes her way onto the Morningstar, and the rest, we don't know, because Riot has thus far refused to tell us what happens. And Kane is actually much more of a compelling villain than it might seem here. In the trailer, he looks like just a kooky, crazy comedy villain, but when the Odyssey skins came out, he received one of the absolute best short stories in all of League of Legends, The Lure, which describes his temptation and fall in beautiful detail. It paints a portrait of everything that's lost when Rast corrupts him, the genuinely thoughtful and even noble person that he used to be, which becomes a tragic portrait indeed when compared with the preening lunatic he quickly becomes. It's a great hook for a villain who isn't just a cackling comedy sociopath, but someone with genuine pathos. There's a really great story to tell here, and all Riot has ever done with it is pump out half a dozen more skins with absolutely no context to make them compelling, and then they seemingly abandoned the entire skin line when it turned out that people weren't actually that interested in random cosmetics, but in fact had got excited about a group of well-presented characters in an interesting universe. Odyssey deserves an adaptation. It needs one, because as long as Riot Games Limited, the corporation, sees them as only a skin line that's meant to sell cosmetics, they will be dead in limbo forever, and nothing that was cool about them will ever actually get to mean anything. And look, it doesn't have to be an Arcane level show, Riot. It can be, I don't know, a comic book or a novel. I'll take a syndicated comic strip, a narrative podcast, whatever. Just don't let something this cool just languish and die because you can't figure out a way to monetize it for more cosmetics. I love the crew of the Morningstar. I desperately want to know what happens to them next, and I am never going to find out so long as they are trapped in the eternal purgatory of being a skin mill for Riot Games Incorporated. Give it to some goddamn storytellers, please. Hey, thank you very much for watching this list video, I guess. I don't generally do a lot of these because, well, I mean, I put out a lot of hour-long videos, and you guys generally seem to like those more, so casual videos like this one, casual in air quotes because it was actually a lot of editing work to put this together, but I kind of feel bad about doing like more casual videos because it takes time away from the big ones, which seems to be what my audience wants. On the other hand, I was also able to finish this video in like a few days rather than a few weeks, and I'm not gonna lie, that actually feels really good. And it's probably also good for the channel, honestly. Unless the video tanks, in which case it's bad, but my point is, I might try, depending on how this one does, I might try to do more shorter, slightly simpler videos, especially since I am really backlogged right now. I'm still editing entries for the Many Meanings of Bloodborne video. It's like a 190-page thing that needs to be put together. I have a crap ton of Elden Ring footage that needs to be turned into episodes, and I have a bunch of other work that I can't really talk about yet that also needs to be finished before I can move on to anything else, so yeah. In happier news, I have just checked, and I have been able to put out a short every single day without fail since March over on my Shorts channel, and that, I mean, that's been a lot of work, but I'm genuinely really quite proud of what I've been able to do over there, and just like how much stuff I've been able to make without sacrificing too much on quality. And people seem to like those, which I'm very happy with. So that's also a mood booster. Anyway, if you made it this far into the video, you can put a peach emoji in the comments down below if you want to, and I'll put a little heart on all of those. That's obviously a naked ploy for increased video engagement, but also, the last time I asked people to put like a random emoji in the comments, it did actually confuse a whole bunch of people who were like, what the hell's up with all these emojis? And like for me, when I'm going through like 2,000 comments a day in order to moderate them, that's just like a little treat for me. That's just a little fun thing. So if you want to help me out with that, help me confuse some people. Put peach emojis in the comments. Anyway, this video is sponsored, so I'm not going to do self-promotion. I'll just say thank you very much for watching. Remember to look out for each other, take your vaccines, and act with solidarity towards those who are worse off than yourself.